Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I am your host, Ray Harkins. And when I do these intros, it's kind of funny because I literally have to move to get myself like pumped and excited. So, like, I'm just imagine me sitting in front of my computer, talking into a microphone, kind of holding it and sort of spinning around in my desk chair. That's just to sort of paint a really, really captivating visual for those of you who want we want that. But if you don't, then who cares? Just close your eyes and ignore the fact that I ever said that. Anyways, let's dig into some business and then we can talk about the guest this week. Propertyofzach.com. They have a great site. You should be visiting it on a very regular basis. You should be checking out their news that they post. You should be checking out their new reviews that they post. You should like them on Facebook. There's a bunch of different stuff that you should be doing with this site. They are a 3 to 4 time daily visit for me personally, just to kind of keep up with what's happening. So check it out. I highly encourage that, and I'm very happy about our partnership. Next thing, review the show. I said that we were getting closer and closer to having 100-star reviews on iTunes. I want you, if you haven't done it yet, please do me a solid. Go there, take 2 seconds, rate it how many ever stars you think, and then even if you want to have that extra level of interaction slash nerdiness, you can review the show. Tell me what you like, what you don't like, because I really do read them and I really do take those to heart. And I try my best to sort of adapt and change and make sure that whatever it is that I'm producing, will please the most amount of people. And then also visit the website. A lot of you have been emailing recently. When I say a lot, like a handful, 5, 6, 7 of you, which is awesome because I love to have that interaction with people and, make new friends. Because after all, that's kind of what we're doing here in the first place. Making new friends, having you hang out with people I know or people I don't know that you would like to know. Anyways, we also, when I say we, the show, will be having a year-end best of list episode. So we will be throwing out the whole interview process, and we will, myself and some previous guests of the show will be sitting in a room together and talking about our favorite records of the year. I personally always love the episodes the time of the year where we can talk about our favorite records, just because it's so fun to hear what other people's opinions are and to be introduced to hopefully some new music that you might not have ever checked out in the first place. So be on the lookout for that. I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to post that, but it will be before the Christmas holiday. So be prepared. Get your pen and paper out and take furious notes, and I'll play some music from some of the stuff that we recommend. And my guest this week, Mark Beemer from Shirts for a Cure. Some of you may have seen his stuff out there. He's a pretty well-known nonprofit machine in the sense of they've been around for 10 or so years. They've been around for a long time. And Mark is the head honcho. I don't even know if you call the head person of a nonprofit a CEO. I don't even know what label he puts himself because I don't think he labels himself as anything. But I've known the guy for a while, met him, I don't know, the early aughts, as they say, and just immediately thought he was awesome. He's just very straightforward dude. We got introduced by basically busting each other's chops. Like I saw he was wearing I think it was a Turning Point t-shirt. I can't remember exactly, but we just started jabbing each other. He took jabs at me for working for the nonprofit organization that I do, and we just make fun of each other in a very loving and positive way. And so I just always really respected the work and still respect the work that he does. And it's awesome that he is able to not only sell a lot of shirts for the cause and the organization, but in turn to be able to get kids, when I say kids, younger people to just start to get introduced to independent music into something larger than themselves. Because I think ultimately, when people look at independent music and or say, what's the difference between, this band and this mainstream band? Because obviously there's a lot of the lines have been blurred over the years, but ultimately what I always go back to is the fact that independent music has some sort of pulse, has the wherewithal, and some people might say intelligence, however you'd like to label it, that they care about something, they stand for something. Um, because obviously you see a lot of the music that is out there, from the sort of top 40 mainstream audience music, um, which I mean I personally love as well, but that's just on a very sonic level. People like whatever Taylor Swift, all that type of stuff. She's addressing her emotions and obviously what she goes through in her life, but she's not really taking any definitive controversial stands. But anyways, I digress. Independent music has a pulse. It has that sort of undercurrent of this is not right in the world, and I am doing something to change it in some way, shape, or form. Oh, there's a drinking game. Anytime I say some way, shape, or form, people take a shot. Um, but yeah, so anyways, I just get excited when I see purveyors of giving a shit trying to pass the give a shitness on to younger people who may just kind of stumble into this music scene and are like, oh, this is cool, but um, they want to get attached more, and then they get introduced to an organization like Shirts for a Cure and go, that's exactly what I want to do, that's exactly what I want to spend my money on, want to help donate to, whatever. So yeah, long-winded intro, but here's my chat with Mark. I met up with him at the Fest in Florida. This is one of a series of interviews I did while I was down there, in the likes of which I will be bringing to you over the next few weeks. I had him up in my hotel room, which sounds kinky, but it definitely wasn't as kinky as you might think, because basically all we did was talk into a digital recorder. So, yeah, that's that. And I hope you enjoy the interview, and I will talk to you once it's over. All right, here you go. Memory in regards to running across you. I don't know if you remember where, because we first met when I was on tour with Alexis on Fire, and I want to say it was New Jersey.
Philadelphia.
Was it Philly?
Well,
yeah. Oh, it was Jersey or Philly. And I just remember, because I mean, the organization had only been around for maybe 2 or 3 years, if that. And so I knew of its existence, but I had no idea like who you were as a physical being. And then I just remember, I think it was, I think I either made a comment on your Turning Point shirt or something.
Okay.
And then we just started, we immediately just started busting each other's balls.
Of course. Oh, yeah, okay. I do remember. I think that you were on, wasn't it the Alexis Hot Water Moments in Grace tour?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
No, it was New Jersey.
Yeah.
It was,
the Sayreville Ballroom. Yeah. And I just, it was funny because it's like, certain people I feel like I need to work up to be like, all right, here's their level of like busting ballsness. Yeah. But I don't know, for you, it was just immediately like, oh no, this guy can take, like, and because it was like, we just started throwing it back and forth to each other immediately. Yeah. And I was like, that's
fun.
Yeah.
That was a fun little small tour there.
Yeah, it was very fun. So that impression left me with, there's just like, oh, like, because I think anytime you deal with obviously like a serious issue, like, and people have preconceived notions of that, and preconceived notions of the person that's behind that.
Of course.
And be like, oh yeah, Mark, like, he's pretty serious, pretty somber.
Don't mess around with that guy.
Yeah, like cancer's pretty serious, you know.
Right. No, I know exactly. I mean, what I went through was devastating, of course. But
of course.
You have to. For me, I had to get beyond it as soon as I could.
Right.
Because I didn't want to wallow.
Right.
Sure, I'll admit, naming what I did what I'm doing for the past 12 years in her name, in some respect, maybe, I wouldn't say wallowing.
Right.
I mean, when I first started the foundation, I never imagined it would last 11 years.
Of course not.
But and you know, when I originally started it, I was like, okay, how can I keep her name around somehow? I was
Right.
too young to deal with grief and stress, and I was like, okay, I'll start a foundation or actually an endowment.
Right.
And I'm thinking, okay, just to keep her name around, we'll throw some money in it and see what happens. And when I first started raising the money, I started raising it where she was treated at Georgetown University.
Right.
And they're like, okay, great. We encourage you to do this, but to have a named endowment, you have to have 50 grand. I was like, never going to do.
You're
Never.
like, oh, I just have that right here.
Yeah, exactly. I was never going to do that.
Right.
But and I was like, yeah, okay, I'll try. So I threw my hat in the ring, and you know, initially it was I put all my energy into it because I had nothing else to put my energy into.
Right. It was right there, right in front of you. Right.
Exactly, and you know, it was something that I had nothing else to do.
Yeah.
She was working for AOL at the time, and AOL actually meant something at the time.
Right.
And so there was a significant amount of life insurance money, so I didn't have to work.
Yeah.
And so I just put all my energy into it, but not really knowing how to do it. So it was kind of floundering, and it was like, all right, you know, people have done this before, I'll do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so the first couple of years was first year was kind of like, you know, doing the generic foundation charity thing, and it wasn't me.
No.
It didn't feel right.
No.
So I started becoming, I kept the energy and intensity, but loosened up a bit and started doing something just whatever I liked.
Yeah.
Throwing a fundraising spin on it.
Right.
And I mean, that's how the shirts came about.
Right.
Going to shows when we were younger, and I'm even older than you, so when I was younger,
Right.
it was all about, of course, the event and hanging out, but also getting the extra large t-shirt, because it was only extra large.
No, yeah, dude. That's
when the first person who asked me what size I wanted, I just kind of looked at him like, "What do you mean what size?
Right.
It's one size. It's extra large."
I know. I anytime I clean out my closet, and I just, you know, if I'm going from size to size, if I'm like, all right, I'm a large now, or all right, I'm a medium now, and just looking back at my old shirts and just like, you know, when you're 15, that's what you did. Like, you bought extra large shirts, but then I'm like, there just wasn't an option. Like, I think there's maybe large and extra large, but yeah.
Well, if you were lucky, if it was a like the first band I saw who actually understood merch was Instead. Their last tour, they went on. They brought, I think, 7 or 8 designs, and they made so much money in merch alone.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that they all bought SUVs when they got home. It was like that was like
that was the word on the street.
That was the
yeah.
East Coast legend of this West Coast band. But I saw them like 3 or 4 times on that tour, and I was just like amazed at the merch wall that they brought.
Right.
Looking back, it was probably, you know, not that impressive for what people bring out now. But
Right.
that was the first band that didn't have just like a dirty box of shirts that was in their garage for a couple of weeks before they brought it up.
Like a total afterthought.
They're like, oh, we need shirts. Who can print them?
Right.
Who's at art school right now?
Johnny down the street.
Yeah, exactly.
So where were you, like, born and raised? Always on the East Coast?
Mm-hmm. I was born in Palo Alto, out in California.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Both my parents are grad students at Stanford.
Okay.
And
you come from a very smart family.
So we lived there for a year, moved to Taiwan for a couple of years. My dad was a Chinese doctoral candidate. So
oh, wow.
We were in Taiwan for this small bit.
Uh-huh.
And then eventually, after a couple of hops here and there, I ended up in D.C.
Okay.
And grew up in D.C. We were there in the late 70s, and I was there all the way through high school.
So those were, like, essentially D.C. was what you kind of view as your formative years.
Very much so. Yeah. And being from D.C., you know, I was spoiled with music. My first show ever was Government Issue, Marginal Man, and the Slicky Boys. And after that, it was just like, oh, this is what life is about.
Right.
Or it just opened your eyes. You know,
yeah.
You had the same, it doesn't matter who you are. You always have that same experience. You go to something on, you know, either by accident or because someone drags you to it, or like on a whim. Like, I'll check this out.
Right.
Mine was Rock Against Apartheid, and it was something my high school put on.
Okay.
And you know, some hip kid had all his friends' bands play.
Yeah.
And we were all went there to support the cause, and I was like, wow. And it wasn't Government Issue, and it wasn't Slicky Boys. It was Marginal Man, because they were my age.
Right.
And it was like these kids on stage playing this raw energy. And up until that point, I was all that metal, and Cliff Burton, and that whole world was me.
Really?
And I loved it, but I was starting to wane a little bit because it just started in the mid '80s. It started to become a little more like the Motley Crue world.
Well, yeah, of course. It started to shift it from the the thrash metal into glam metal,
right? And I started to, and the thrash metal became more dark, and I just didn't want. I wanted to stay with Metallica and Iron Maiden. And
right.
They would always, they would disappear for years and go on album cycle. Right?
Yeah.
So you need to fill a void, and so when I first saw Marginal Man, I was, this is it.
Right.
And I remember the next day, I didn't know where to buy the record. The next day, I went to Tower Records, which is right down on 20th. It's gone now, but 20th and Pennsylvania. And I was like, oh, Marginal Man, I gotta find it. And I found not the Discord, but the one that put out afterwards that was on Giant, I think.
Yeah.
And I played that constantly.
Yeah.
And it was just like, and then that record opened up a world.
Right, of course.
And I didn't really explore that world for probably another year or so, but it just took off.
Yeah. So was music, because like you said, you got into metal. Like, do you have any brothers and sisters?
I have two sisters, younger.
So you're the oldest.
Yes. My middle sister was into the Alarm and that kind of world, more like, underground, but not punk at all.
Right.
The Alarm, no one could ever consider punk. Maybe at the time because of what they dressed like.
Right. Yeah, maybe in aesthetics.
Right. Joy Division, New Order, that whole world.
Sure.
So a very suburban take on what was going on anymore.
Got it.
But that never influenced me. She was my sister. It's like,
yeah. Well, yeah. You don't care. You're like, you do
especially
you.
my younger sister.
Right. There's no way that you could bite her style and feel good about it. And so, did music play a part of your parents? Like, did they listen to it and were like,
very much so. It was when I was growing up. We had a turntable.
Nice.
And an old Olsen and it was something that I would always sit around listening to music. It was always my parents' records. My parents they weren't hippies, but they went to school in San Francisco during that time period. So they were influenced by that world. And my dad, for a short period of time, booked shows at the Fillmore. Promoted shows at the Fillmore.
Sure. But he had a connection to the arts.
Right. So he had a stack of the original like Led Zeppelin avocado posters and all those things.
Wow.
So, sitting around the house, and I didn't know what those meant until years later. But because of that, he had quite a vinyl collection, and I would go through it. And Janis Joplin's Cheap Thrills record.
Okay.
Had the cartoons on it.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but it's I used to listen to that constantly, just because I used to listen to that all the time because of the cover.
Of course.
So I was always drawn to music in two respects: the music, but also the aesthetically.
Of course.
And one of my favorite records was the Stanford University Marching Band, and it wasn't just because of the music; it was because they had these great photographs of the tubas on the cover.
Oh, sure.
And at that time period, in late 60s, early 70s, you could paint your tuba any the way you wanted. So all these like really psychedelic tubas.
Right.
And there was a black and red one. I don't remember. I thought they were just the coolest things in the world because these kids are decorating their own tubas.
Right.
Thinking back now, it's totally foolish, but it was awesome.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, when you're a kid, you see something like that, and that's obviously what is so interesting about how when you're so young, you're super impressionable. And those little things can obviously stick with you for years where you're like, that was awesome. Yeah. And it's like, you look at that cover and be like, that was.
Well, I think that if I saw something similar, I would not be impressed. But I think that if I saw that exact one, I'd be jazzed.
Oh, of course. Right.
So yeah, so those records, and then the Beatles records, because that was that era.
Of course.
And then it just kind of like, it grew from there. I started to reach out and figure out my own style. And I remember I saved up my money. I wanted to buy my own cassette tape.
Sure.
It was like half a box. It was like one speaker, not two speakers.
Right.
And so it was one speaker and a cassette tape. So it was radio, AM and FM,
Of course.
and cassette tape, and it was $42. I had to save.
Right.
And my dad and I went to Best and Company, a local department store in the East
Sure.
Coast. And I bought my cassette player, radio also, and then there was a Peaches, which is a music store at that time.
Okay.
I bought a Joan Jett and the Blackhearts cassette tape.
Incredible.
And that opened my world to the early to metal, essentially, even though Joan Jett was not metal.
No, but she had an attitude.
Right, exactly. She had a foot in that world.
Of course.
And it just kind of grew from there. AC/DC, going to see them, and my first live concert was Iron Maiden and Twisted Sister.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
did your dad take you?
My dad
Dropped you off?
Actually, that was my first experience that it was my choice.
Right.
We had gone to concerts before, but it was always because my parents wanted to go.
Yeah,
or they were like, let's do this together.
Right.
Which is great.
Of
And
course.
I encourage that. But my first choice was like, I'm going to see Iron Maiden.
That's incredible.
It was the Cap Center. the mighty Cap Center, 18,000 people.
That's awesome. And so then as you were making, so like you were in high school, you sort of started, like you said, transitioning out from, being like, did you have long hair? Were you like super metal dude?
No,
or
I couldn't grow my hair long. It was all just a big fro.
Right. So it just grew out as opposed to down?
If I could have grown it down, I would have.
You would have,
But all my friends did. And I went to a private school for 3 years, for 7, 8, and 9. And it was a private school that it was sold to my parents inappropriately. They sold them to them as a way to give kids a leg up. But it was mostly it was a private school for kids who couldn't get into all the elite private school. But we didn't know that.
I see.
And it's funny because it was just like a bunch of assholes, and then kids like us who were, to use the phrase from Suburbia, the rejected.
Right.
And there was, kids who were shy, smart, but couldn't really apply themselves.
Sure.
So it was like myself, and then I met all my lifelong friends there.
Okay.
Who weren't the assholes who couldn't get into elite private schools, who were sold on the school for other reasons.
Right.
And we just destroyed that place. And we all ended up getting either kicked out or leaving our own. Not one of us ever graduated for it. So I ended up going, so I went from there to public high school. And then when I went to public high school, there were people who had long hair and who actually were living the metal world. And I was like, yes.
Right. I will gravitate towards you.
Exactly, right. And so, I learned the magic of Yngwie Malmsteen, that whole world instantly. And it was just, I never grew my hair out, couldn't do it, but metal is my world. And then when I started leaving the metal world, I fell into punk.
Got it.
Local DC hardcore. And
right.
It was just,
well, yeah, because it's right there in your backyard. And so would you classify your high school experience as definitely, like you said, you were part of the quote unquote fringes, so to speak, where it's like, you weren't, homecoming king and doing all that stuff.
No, I mean, I did those things. I wasn't homecoming king, no.
Right.
But I did those things, but on my own terms.
Sure.
So it was.
You felt comfortable with that. And it was like, you weren't, excluding yourself from these things, but you're like, I'll do this because like my friends are going or whatever.
Right, exactly. It was all about friends.
Yeah, of course.
And I went to. We growing up in that area, we were spoiled,
right?
Because of the music that you could see, and the people who I went to high school with, Jeff Turner went to high school with me. Jeff Turner went on to Senator Flux, and he was in Grey Matter. And other bands like that, and so he would bring elements of that world into our school. And
Got it.
When he and a couple of his friends did the Mises the Pig poster all over DC, he did it all. He did it on our high school as well, and he just so anyway. So yeah, music was always king for me.
Sure. And so in high school, and sort of as the idea of, because I mean, obviously you're supposed to start to quote unquote figure out what you want to do with your life, and like did you apply yourself? Were you a good student, or did you kind of just like coast by?
I I applied myself. I
Sure.
didn't get the best grades, but it was mostly I'm a terrible test taker. Always knew the concept, and I was always in advanced classes, but I always get by in the advanced classes, and
Got it.
it was mostly because I wanted to be in the I didn't want to be I wanted to be in the advanced classes, even though it was hard and a
Right.
struggle. So I did the best I could.
Sure.
The classroom work and the effort grades are always great, but the actual academic grades are not the best because I just can't take a test. I mean,
You have the anxiety behind it.
yeah, anxiety, and I bet now if I had to take a test, I would probably fail it. But
Yeah.
it's there are a lot of people out there who just can't take a test.
It's
and
totally.
yeah, especially you know the concepts, you've studied hard, but you get there and you just draw a blank or
Of course.
so yeah, I did as well as I could.
Yeah.
And
Didn't you have an idea of what you kind of wanted to sort of?
I didn't. I had no idea what I wanted to do with life.
Right.
I knew what I didn't want to do with life. I didn't want to sit I didn't want to sit at
In a cubicle.
In a cubicle.
Yeah.
I didn't want to sit at a desk. I didn't want to have an in and out box on my desk.
Right.
I remember that distinctly. Don't want the in and out box.
And it's so funny that's like, I mean, that concept, like, that still exists, but it's like, if you told like
such an 80s thing.
right, like if you told like a 16 or 17-year-old kid, like, yeah, there's an inbox now, they're like, what?
What are
Like,
you talking about?
yeah, paperwork, like, yeah, that's funny, yeah,
What's that?
totally, in and out box, yeah.
So I went off to university. I went to a small school in Vermont for my first year just because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to stay at home. I didn't want to get a job. I wanted to go off and experience university, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I went to a small college in Vermont just because I love Vermont, and I knew that if it wasn't going to work out, I was in no
You at
place.
least, you
Right,
enjoyed
I was
surroundings.
in a place that I wanted to be.
Right.
And while there, I didn't really. I guess I didn't really educate myself about the university, the college before I went there, and it became very much obvious it was very much a local school,
Right.
and not local, but like state.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So it was myself and a couple other people who were from lower East Coast, and then mostly a bunch of Vermont locals, which is fine. It just wasn't for me though. So I really immersed myself in music, and more than I had before, and mail order was my favorite person in the world, and I just anything that looked relatively cool, I would order it. And at that point, it was all about aesthetics because you couldn't hear the 7-inch.
You couldn't sample anything.
Right.
No, you
no
based
sample.
off. You read the description. You said, "Wow, that sounds cool." They compare it to certain bands.
Exactly. Or if certain labels put out Instabuy.
Of course, you're like, "Oh yeah, this Discord put it out. Of course, I'll buy it."
Of course.
And so like, did your was your relationship with your parents like during high school, as you were obviously getting into, because I mean every parent struggles with the idea of their kid getting into something that they don't understand, and so like were they, as you were going to shows and stuff, were they kind of like, what's Mark doing, like?
They honestly they just wanted me to be happy and safe, and they would drive me and drop me off and then pick me up, and then or I would always have a curfew, and they would always secretly wait up for me. But I also, because I grew up in a loving family, I never wanted to break that trust. So I always come home for curfew. Or if I stayed at my friend's house, I knew that I could stay out later. But I also I wasn't breaking anything. It was.
It's so funny that, because I have a similar experience with my family, and I wish I could just tell teenagers, like, you'll be given a longer leash to do shit if you just like show a modicum of respect. Like if you just, like you said, where it's like, okay, like these rules are set forth, I'll live by these parameters, and like you'll know how to bend them and like still have fun and still accomplish what you're trying to do. But it's like so many kids, like the minute they have that teen angst of being 15 and fuck you parents, and it's like you're gonna have a hard high school.
Exactly. Because I mean, I could basically do anything I wanted. To a point, and it's because of the experiences I had up until I started asking for certain things.
Right, you built that trust. Right.
I wasn't a wild kid. I did what I wanted, but I also wasn't going out and
slamming heroin.
Or I wasn't out doing graffiti. I wasn't out doing vandalism. I was out hanging with my friends in a safe environment that.
Right.
sure, we were the bosses of that environment,
Of
but
course.
it was a safe environment.
Right. You're going to diners and,
Yeah.
messing around and having food fights and but yeah. And so then as you were so like what were you trying to study in college? Like were you
Well, initially, I did, well, my first year, I was like, let's try business out. And I love the economic classes. I liked
Okay.
macro and microeconomics, and I did quite well with the classes.
Mhm.
But I really didn't know how to apply them to my world.
Yeah.
I knew them not.
Like they
I had,
knew the concepts,
right, I knew the
but
concepts, and I was just kind of like, this is awesome, but it's all theory.
yeah. Mhm.
So, and I knew that I had to get out of this small little school in Vermont.
Right.
So I applied to the University of Wisconsin and to
Okay.
essentially to row because I rowed in high school. And
I didn't know that.
I was quite good at it, and I really wanted to get back into that world. Be myself, but still compete in
Right.
some sort of.
So basically your freshman year of college, you didn't row.
I did because they didn't offer the program.
Right.
So, and I didn't really think I would miss it, but I felt that I was, after like for half a year of school, I felt that I was missing that element.
Right.
And I later in life I would fill that element with some other things besides rowing, but at that point I knew that I was missing something.
Uh-huh.
So I applied to Wisconsin, got into it, and joined the crew team. But it just, I loved Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And I loved going to school there, so I never regret anything. But I didn't really follow through on the crew. I joined the team.
Yep.
Did everything I could do to be part of the team, but it was very elitist. It became your major essentially.
Yeah.
Like you give them 4 years and then go for a fifth year, so you make up all the classes that you had to miss because you're on this career team. And
Right.
Wisconsin was always national champions.
Right. It's a very serious program.
Yeah, it's a very serious program. And they have elite coaches and I love my short term on it, but it turned out, it wasn't for me. I wanted to have a university experience beyond athletics.
Right.
And beyond the NCAA rules. And I just...
Yeah, it wasn't a right fit.
Right. I didn't drink, of course, and I was still straight edge, and it just wasn't my world.
Right.
And so
it's the concept and idea of a kid, essentially a punk rock kid into rowing. Like, that in and of itself, like, doesn't make sense.
Right. It made sense. It made sense in high school,
right?
And it made sense a little bit, but not to the level that they wanted.
Sure.
And it just wasn't for me.
Right.
But because of that, I was able to. Well, I met a lot of great people my first year in school,
mm-hmm.
and then those people became my people throughout the rest of my experience there at University of Wisconsin, and I ended up starting to book shows there, and I booked an Instead show there.
Nice.
And I did a Murphy's Law show there. I did a lot of. I tried to bring the experiences that I had to the Midwest. Not really like doing the math and thinking about it, but getting to Wisconsin, it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it is
for most bands,
right.
And even now.
Yeah.
And most bands get to Chicago and maybe go to Minneapolis.
Right.
But they're not stopping in Milwaukee, and they're not stopping in Madison.
No.
So when I started asking bands to stop in Wisconsin and stop in Madison, most people were like, no. But some people would, and I would always be embarrassed because there wouldn't be a big draw.
Right.
Even though they were huge on the coasts.
Yep. You always battled the Midwest curse.
Exactly. And but I was, like I said, I was too young.
Yeah.
And hadn't had that experience before, so I was just kind of like...
Well, yeah, you were just... I mean, your enthusiasm was driving the fact that it's like, well, I mean, it's a big city. Like, right. Here we go. Like, I'm putting great bands in front of you people. And, yeah, it's definitely tough to match up those visions.
Right. So, such is life.
Yeah. And so then, yeah, as you're transitioning, like, through college and everything, what spoke to you in regards to like, okay, like this is what I sort of want to set my course for? Or was it like after once music had sort of, you're like, I just want to do something with music?
Well, I knew that,
because you never strike me as like, because people that go through like that start to experience music like you do, A lot of them have that sort of knee-jerk reaction where it's just like, oh, like I want to work in the music industry, like this, and
Right.
you've never struck me as that.
No, I've always brought the same attitude to everything.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to do it my way, and if my way isn't what they want, fine. I'll do something else. But
Right.
I'm not going to do it your way.
Right.
And that's why I always gravitated towards Ian and what he built, because when he built it, there were no rules for what you did because he invented it. He
Right.
invented those rules.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, he looked at SST and what Black Flag was doing, and
Right. There were influences, but they
Right.
were all at the same level.
Right. But he took that idea and built a world out of it.
Yeah.
And so I obviously never went that far, but I always wanted to do I always wanted to do what I wanted to do, but on my own terms.
Sure.
So
sure.
because I was always into the aesthetics of music,
Mhm.
I was given a camera one year and decided, hey, maybe I'll start bringing this to shows.
Yeah.
And I started working for the newspaper in the University of Wisconsin. I
Okay.
loved it, and I was like, maybe this is where I need to be.
Sure.
So I did everything I could to be that person. And once I finished up in Wisconsin, I went off to the School of Visual Arts
Oh, okay.
in Manhattan for 2 years and got a degree there as well. And everything I learned in Wisconsin and all the contacts I made and everything, and just taking all that, balling it up, and then moving to Manhattan, it let me grow, but everybody that I knew from high school either lived in New York or
Right.
traveled to New York constantly. So I took all of those friends and made a big melting pot.
Right.
And so once I moved to New York, I moved in with two high school friends and started going to school, and it just became, started going to visual arts school.
Right.
I had already gone to school, but we joined we formed our own little. That's I can't say I formed my own crew because we didn't.
Right.
We had a group of friends.
Of course.
That we just did everything together with.
Right.
It was the Mariansky brothers. It was Scoots. It was Daly. It was Lenny. It was that whole crew that went on to be Texas and went on to do Just Brazil.
Right.
All those guys. We used to hang out together constantly. Right when they moved to New York, and when Brian was still in high school, he would come into the city for shows.
Uh-huh.
So we would go to the wetlands all the time, and
Sure.
I would always bring my camera. I would always have my camera with me. And
Right.
it just became my excuse to go see music.
Yeah.
Because after a while, X, Y, and Z were in bands, so they were there because they're the band. And I never felt like a fifth wheel, but I always wanted. I'm very antsy.
Uh-huh.
I have to do something. I can't just sit there and watch a band. I can do that, but
It's
want,
not your first choice.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Right. I want to do something more. So
Right.
I brought my camera along and started to really have that experience. And
Sure.
it turns out I'm actually quite good at this.
Right.
So I started doing it more and more. And then I would start doing it when someone asked me to do it. Or I would show them the photographs that I took. And they'd be like, oh, check this out, And I never sold them. I just gave them. And because that's what you did back then.
Yeah.
And the budgets were such a joke. And maybe they give you $25 after you spent like $300 in development and printing
The
costs.
dark rooms. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, here's $25. I'm like, awesome.
You're like, cool. I
Yeah.
can have dinner, I guess.
Exactly. And then because of that, I started to go on tour, and I went on a nationwide tour with Worlds Collide, and I did a European tour with Battery, and their first European tour, and that was wild. It was
That's
right
amazing.
after the wall had fallen, and it was
Wow.
a couple of years. Sorry, a couple of
Yeah,
years.
but
after,
still, yeah. And it wasn't.
In retrospect, a couple of years.
Right, of course.
And it was still most of the shows that we did were weirdly were in the former Eastern Bloc, East Germany.
Yeah.
And I just remember being so cold on that tour, never being able to warm up because no one had heat, and we played a lot of squats, and they would have these weird essentially it was like a flame blower.
Right.
That there's no safety involved.
Right.
It's just a big flame.
It's just
coming
open
out,
flame. Right.
Coming out of this butane Betty. and we would all try to warm ourselves.
Yeah.
But because of my camera, I just started to get asked to do certain things, and just kind of always being at shows because of my friends, because of
Right,
my
because
camera.
obviously it's like when you travel with people and you become like these. I mean, not a crew in in the pejorative
Right,
sense of the term, but just
right,
like those opportunities expand because they're like, oh yeah, like Mark, like dude, let's have him do some photos, like let's
right.
bring him along. So when did your first relationship in regards to obviously the foundation and everything, like when did that all kind of transpire? Like when did that happen?
You mean Sarintha?
Yeah. Sorry.
I met Sarintha um, at University of Wisconsin,
Got it.
and she worked in the ad department, and I worked I was the photo editor of
Sure.
the Daily Cardinal, as they call it.
Okay.
And we just hit it off,
Hmm.
and we dated. Um, but when I moved to New York, the long term relationships, especially when you're that young,
So
don't
hard.
work.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
work. So, and I don't think either of us were really willing to make it work. Plus financially we couldn't.
Right.
We could barely pay our rents, let alone
Buy some plane flights.
right,
Yeah.
travel. And that time, traveling was very expensive. I mean,
Sure.
and sure, it's not all that cheap now, but it's a lot cheaper than it was then.
Yep.
Like retrospective. So because of that, it just it didn't work out, so it kind of fizzled.
Right.
But later, I guess third year in New York, I felt that there was something there.
Right.
And I hadn't been looking in New York. I hadn't been trying.
Right.
It's all about hardcore.
Right. Yeah. You weren't a man on the town.
Yeah.
You weren't hitting the clubs. Yeah.
No, man. It was all about going to music.
Of
And
course.
at that time period, women didn't go, or if they did, they were all about chicks up front, and they weren't interested in dudes. I mean, they could have been, but they just
Right.
not
That
who
wasn't
they
their
were.
priority.
That
Right.
wasn't
Right.
right. Their priority was about kicking boys in the shins and
Yeah.
being up front, which
Right.
is great, awesome, more
Of
power to
course.
you. But
Right.
anyway, so I went back for some reason. I don't
Hmm.
know what it was. But we started talking again, and it happened. It just when I felt like when I was living in New York, I loved living in New York. I went to school there, finished my school day at school in there. I had a great time. All my friends were there.
Hmm.
But after school, after a year out of school, most people started to scatter a
Right.
little bit,
Yeah.
and
Find jobs
find
and
well,
whatever.
jobs. Who needs a job?
All right.
But so they started kind of like migrating towards what they want to do. Some people stayed in Jersey and would come into the city less. One of my roommates, Tim Owen, moved to Delaware to really finally make J-Tree his priority. At that time, J-Tree was not a priority, but they were still putting records out. But he moved to Delaware, and him and Darren really made J-Tree.
Yeah. Focal point. Sure.
Right,
Exactly.
to become what it would be. And then Tolliver moved into Manhattan, and I was stuck with two roommates that I didn't really know because they, when you move out of a group house at that time, you find someone.
Yeah.
And, you got to find someone quick. So
Of course, because they give you 3 days. Because
right.
Yeah.
And so you're not always looking at the most logical choice.
Right. The long term.
Right. So I just decided that it was not for me, and if I really wanted to do photojournalism, I can't do it in the city because I'm not the best of the best yet.
Right.
So I had to go out and find I had to leave the city to grow my craft if I wanted to return to a city, any
Right.
city, and become the elite. So
Sure.
I applied to every newspaper in the Northeast because I knew where I wanted to be in the Northeast. I didn't want to go anywhere in the Midwest. Between Pennsylvania and Denver, there's nothing there.
Right.
So I moved to New Hampshire, Laconia, New Hampshire, small little town.
Okay.
Weirs Beach, they have a big bike thing there every year.
Okay.
Bike week. And I was the photographer for the newspaper there, and I loved it. And
Oh,
it was
okay.
the best job I've ever had.
That's
but
cool.
making $13,000 a year,
Right.
very hard to live on. And they pay you that little because A, they can get away with it, and B, they can trap you there because they pay you enough to live in
Right.
that environment and live okay, but not enough to save money.
Right.
so you can actually move on to the next
Right.
step in your career.
That they specifically calculated, like,
Yeah, exactly.
this will keep the person
Right.
here.
Yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah.
Probably not true, but that's how I looked at it.
No, I mean, it's true.
Right.
There's probably some thought process behind that. Yeah.
So I was there for a year and a half, and I had rekindled my relationship with Sorrentha to a point, and she was moving to Minneapolis to go to grad school, and I was really starting to not like this. I loved the photography, but not like the situation.
Right.
So we decided to make a go of it
Mm-hmm.
and move together to Minnesota. So we did it.
Right.
And while she went to grad school, I worked at a studio.
Got it.
A digital photography studio. At that time, digital photography was all about slow. It was essentially a scanner strapped to the back of a 4x4, so everything would move really slowly. So it was all stills.
Okay.
Nothing moving.
Sure.
And so I did that and shot shows as much as I could.
Right.
And that was during the time, all about basement shows for 7th Street Entry or that whole world was really exploding, which was great because I saw a lot of great shows. And
Sure.
and whenever my friends would come through town, they always stay at my place and hang out with them, and I would take photographs of either portraits during the day and then live shots at night. And
Yeah.
so it was great to have them come through, and I grew my relationship with Sorrentha.
Right.
And after grad school, she started working for this small little organization called America Online.
Right.
And that's what it was at that time.
Of course. It was a startup. Right.
Small, strange, essentially web portal.
Yeah.
Because people didn't know what the World Wide Web was.
No.
They needed someone to hold their hand. And AOL was willing to hold their hand.
Totally.
And so she started working at the local office in Minneapolis, and then after a year or so, they asked her to move to the corporate office in Washington, D.C. And I was like, yes, done.
Yeah, you're like, let's go with that. Yeah.
And so we moved back, and we lived in Northern Virginia, inside the Beltway, so still considered D.C.
Yeah.
D.C. is funny. If you look at it, it's a diamond.
Yeah.
With the bottom section cut out. It's because Virginia took their section back.
Right.
It's really weird. But anyway, so we lived in that section. So legally Virginia, but
right. But it's
mentally DC.
Right.
But so we lived there, and I rekindled things with my high school friends a bit.
Right.
Everybody had moved on, and all the Battery kids had scattered, and Brian was living in Boston at the time, and Ken was just being a douchebag, and so I found I still went to shows all the time, and mostly. Started really hanging out with the Philly world, like Kid Dynamite,
right,
and Eamon, and that whole world. Whenever they would come down, we hang out, do photographs.
Right.
I would really do whatever Tim and Darren asked for photography wise. Got it. Because Tim and Darren were good friends, and
of course
they always had my back, so I would do photographs with them. And Sorrentha and I got married, bought a house, and
how long you guys have been together? How long at that point?
We were together
besides the hiatus, obviously.
Yeah. So we got married in summer of '99.
Okay.
And we had been together since '92.
Okay.
With a couple year hiatus. So,
right.
For a while.
Yeah.
So adult life.
Sure.
And so we were to be married in July. We were married in July, but she was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer in May.
Got it.
And young and devastated, but also young and strong.
Sure.
So we were like, all right, do it.
Yeah.
Bring it.
Of course.
We had friends who had gone through this experience.
Right.
And had come out on the other end.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in the nation's capital, and she was working for an organization that was run by women. So everybody was very supportive there.
Yeah.
And they would never count her out when she had to leave for treatment.
And see that like in hearing about your story, and like obviously like we're not going to delve too deeply into it because obviously it's been said other places. That's the one thing that always struck me is like you feel people obviously immediately equate corporations as being evil, and like there are a lot of examples with that. Mm-hmm. But then it's like when you actually do like that story of obviously like how AOL was like, no, we will take care of you,
Right.
and it's like you hear that and you're just like, that's fucking awesome.
Right.
Like that's the way it should be, and obviously it's not always
well,
like that.
I don't know how it is now.
Right.
But that's how it was during the boom years.
Of course.
Because that was during the pinnacle of when online meant something. Now everybody's online.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, no, I was always, I just, I love, I mean, anytime you hear stories about that where it's like, you know, workplaces stand behind their employees from that perspective, you're just like, you know, that's the way that it should be, as opposed to just like, oh shit, like who's gonna get your work done? Like,
right. Anyway, so yeah, we attacked it and got married. And 2 days after we were married, she started treatment, and we were like, let's do it, bring it. And we defeated it. Well, we thought we defeated it.
Right, of course.
Had treatment, had radiation, had surgery, and went on with life. I started to shoot more and see more shows, and start learning Flash and applications like that. And, random like early 2000s.
Adapt with the technologies. Right,
exactly. And I remember, and then we'd go for checkups all the time. And everything was fine.
Yep.
But one particular checkup, they found something.
Right.
And it had spread to her kidneys, and that's hard.
Of course.
It's a hard one to come back from.
Right.
So we fought it aggressively. We fought it with experimental treatments, and living within walking distance of NIH allowed us to use some of their doctors and some of their ideas and everything. Cancer is the only organism that's in your body that figures out what it's being fought with
and adapts. Yep.
And it's devastating. It's genius, but it's devastating.
Sure.
So we would find something that worked for a while and then stop.
Right.
And then we did this for a while.
Sure.
And then eventually, the 24th of December, and Sorrento was like, you know what? We were in the Russian River Valley in Northern California. We were there for Christmas.
Sure.
We just wanted to get away from the world.
Of course.
And she's like, when I get back, I want to stop treatment. And I was like, all right, I can't talk you out of it. I won't even try.
Yeah.
And I understand. And to a certain point, it becomes about quality
of life.
Quality versus quantity.
Of course.
And at that time, she wanted a quality life.
Mm-hmm.
And within 13 days, she was dead.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that was like that.
She had 18 days of her on her terms.
Right. And she's not living it as a quote unquote a victim. She's living it as just like, like I've accepted this. Like we've tried. Like everything that you logically could have done, like you did. And it was like, well, that is what it is. And then obviously it taps into what we were talking about at the very beginning of the conversation, where obviously you do things on your own terms. And obviously like watching, Shirts for a Cure expand, like just, from my perspective, like from the outside looking in, you did something that no one was doing, like straight up. Like no one had the idea to, take something that is, essentially a nonprofit and be able to, like work within the music scene that you've grown up with. And like I look at where things are at now, and like obviously, I work for a nonprofit. Like clearly, like there is competition. Like I find it to me it frustrates. I mean, because obviously I've got no stake in the game in regards to like I didn't start PETA. Like I just work for them. But like seeing the way that so many other organizations, a lot of them start, just they may start from noble ideas, but you just you feel very like
they become machines.
Right.
They lose focus.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm sure you notice that. I'm sure you see
and
that.
I could rattle off a list, but I don't care because
No.
we do what we want within the legal terms.
Right.
And we know the legal definitions. We do an audit every year.
Right.
And outside auditors check our books.
Sure.
So everything that we do is on the up and up, but we also do it the way that we want to do it.
Right.
And we're at the size that we are because I want to be there. We could be huge. We could be bigger than Keep It Breast, but we don't want to be.
Right.
Because we can't keep it on our own terms then. And other people start dictating because there's more money involved.
Right.
And
so how many people like work with you for you on?
Well, there's only one person who works for me.
Got it.
Katie Brown. She's our chief operating officer, if you want to put her term
right. COO.
Yeah, exactly. Or she's just the woman who does everything. How about that?
Right.
And she's actually, well, she's becoming full-time November 1st. So by the time this airs, she's full-time.
That's cool.
And I never wanted to have a full-time employee because of the stress that's involved in that.
Right, the boss nature.
You have to make payroll.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure that her money's there every month.
Right.
But we're at a point that I feel that we can do it. And
right.
Regardless. And I also feel that I'm at a point in my personal life that I need someone to do certain things that I no longer have the energy to do.
Of course.
I've never been a person who can take money from the foundation, so I still have a day job. And that's just because of who I want to be. I don't want to convince someone to give me their $14 for a cool shirt and spend more than half of it on my salary. Can't do that.
Yeah.
That's not who I am. Other organizations feel that they can do that.
Of course.
More power to them.
Right.
But it's just not who we are. So we do. I run the foundation the way that I would want a foundation run if it wasn't run by me.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And also we do what feels right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we wanted a Swiss shirt, I wanted to talk to Jason and got a Swiss shirt. You know?
Right.
Sure, I know that we're going to sell 14 a year.
Right.
I don't care.
We
have a Swiss shirt.
Right.
We have a Fury shirt that less people will buy. But we also have 7 shirts from My Chemical Romance.
Right.
Because they're awesome people.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how great their band is. They're awesome people.
Of course.
And a lot of people like their band.
Yeah.
So they buy the shirt.
Of course.
And same with Rise Against.
Yeah.
4 the best dudes you'll ever meet in your life.
Right.
And apparently a lot of kids like their band.
Yeah.
So again, it's about at this point it's about my personal tastes or my contacts.
Yeah.
Who's willing to give us the rights to their likeness for X amount of T-shirts without much hassle?
Right.
If it's a hassle,
yeah,
we won't do
You're
it.
like, hands are washed.
Because at a certain point, we just don't need it.
Right.
And sure, maybe financially we would like to have that.
Of course.
But it's not who we are and how we started.
Right.
You know, everything we do is DIY.
Yeah.
And that's how we started, and that's how we want it to be.
Right.
And if we have to fold the organization because we can't be DIY, then that would be sad. But we also would do it because it's who we are. You know, it's. I hate to say it's punk, but it is. You know, in punk rock, the term in punk rock is about fucking up the industry from the inside.
Of course.
And we're not trying to fuck anything up, but we're trying to do the right thing the way we want to inside a big machine that is not doing the right thing anymore.
Well, see, and like I sort of to wrap things up and in conclusion, like something that I've always noticed. And like you said it just so succinctly, where it's like you change things from the inside, and the idea that obviously as the independent music culture grows to where it's like it's essentially mainstream at this point, and everybody knows about it in some way, shape, or form. That a lot of people aren't exposed to causes, nonprofits, like all those type of things, unless it's packaged appropriately or But the fact that those things need to exist in order to your organization can obviously inspire a kid that 10, 15 years younger than you and I to be like, oh, like I can do something around this, like because I've experienced this, the disease, whatever the case may be, whatever cause they want to strike up. And it's like I guess the question I'm trying to get at is like the fact that how can you personally, for one, obviously still stay involved and not become, because it's easy to become jaded, super easy to just fucking check out. Like, I mean, we see so many of our friends have done that, and no fault from them, but it's just like the older you get, the more work it is to be involved. And so, like, for you to, I mean, obviously, the foundation is extremely important to you, and that's why you're attached to it. But the fact that you could, yeah, like you said, you could just simply do the bands, like, your, Marginal Man T-shirt. Like, you could just do those things and be like, okay, this is just this thing and it exists. But yeah, how do you not just like throw up your hands and be like, dude, I don't understand shit that's happening now? Like,
Well, okay, yes,
yeah,
but you know what? When you write a check for 40 grand to do without any pretense to a clinic in Chicago and surprise them and seeing what they're going to do with that money and meeting, well, legally you can't meet the women, so I don't meet the women, but
right,
knowing the people who it's going to go for, the type of person who's going to go for it makes everything worth it.
right,
It makes that Iowa to Nebraska drive worth it.
right,
It makes all of these, going from Salt Lake to Cheyenne overnight in black ice, it's worth it because you're going to save someone's life in the long run.
right,
Or you're going to make someone's life better, maybe for a month, maybe for 10 years, but you're going to make someone else's world better.
right,
My life is pretty awesome now, and I had a devastating thing happen to me, but I mean, it sounds like dorky self-help thing, but you take something bad and you make something good out of it.
of course,
And I hope I've done that.
yeah,
And we have 300 bands out there that think that we're doing the right thing,
right,
and we have more than 300 designs available, and now we've branched out into the comic world, and we're
right,
doing cons, and we're introducing ourselves to that new world, and it's huge. That world is bigger than this world could ever be,
totally,
but we're bringing the same aesthetic to that world. We're still like, this is who we are, bring it or go away.
right,
And what we still, it's very punk rock. Johnny X from the Souls is one of our artists, and he's a comic book artist, and he brings us into that world, and we use him as an artist. Gerard from My Chem is a comic book artist.
Yep.
We use him as well. So we're using we're using our punk rock world into the con world, and it's working.
yeah,
And people are very receptive to what we're doing. So we're branching out as well. But
right,
it doesn't matter where we go and how we raise. Well, it doesn't have to raise the money, but it doesn't matter where we are. We are who we want to be, and we use the money. We use the money to do the right thing,
right,
no matter what.
right,
The bottom line is we do the right thing,
right.
and
You do the right thing on your own terms of what feels obviously the best for you. Like, it's funny because it's an altruistic cause, obviously, but it's very selfish in nature, if that makes sense. Like
and I have no apologies about that.
No.
This is who I am. If
Yeah.
you don't want to buy a shirt, that's fine.
Right.
Go support a different cause. And I don't care if you don't either. I'm not going to drill something down your throat.
Right.
We offer awesome shirts.
Yep.
If you want an awesome shirt without the cost, fine. Buy the shirt. Never think about it again.
Yeah.
It's fine. We'll use your money for good things.
Right.
If you really want to be involved, great. You can volunteer at some of our events, and really learn about what we want to do, and then buy a shirt as well.
Right.
So we'll take anybody, and
Yeah.
there's not much more to say about
No,
that.
no, not at all.
It's this is who we are. If you don't want to be part of our world, that's fine.
Yeah.
But
there's plenty of other things
exactly
to be into.
right.
Well, I really appreciate you hanging out and
Of course,
obviously
this is awesome.
opening up and getting, because the thing I like the best about this is, like, obviously it's not sound bites. It's not question.
Yeah.
Tell me the answer.
Enter. Now, go.
Yeah, because it just gives people a better insight of obviously like why people do what they do. So.
That's very NPR. It's good.
Oh, I'm NPR. I love it. Second time I've been called that.
There we go. Got a little serious at points, but obviously anytime you're talking about cancer, it has to get serious. But yeah, that was awesome. I really appreciate Mark coming up early in the morning for the fest. I think it was like 10 or 11. And, he pretty much stayed up until like 4 or 5 in the morning previously. So props to Mark. Props to Property of Zach. Props to all of you for checking it out. I don't know why I'm giving props, but that's what I'm giving. So take them, soak in them,
wait until next week. Another awesome new episode is going to come up. And yeah, have a good week. Be safe, everybody.